The colony world of Arden was far from Earth. It was a young settlement, with farms stretching over wide plains and steel towers rising near the spaceport. The people of Arden worked hard every day, for life in the colony was not easy. They had to grow food, repair machines, and prepare for any threat from the unknown. Yet in all this work, there was little time for joy or beauty. At the colony school, children sat in rows and listened to lessons of math, science, and history. Their teacher, Vorn, was a tall man who spoke with a sharp voice. He believed that discipline and strength were the only things that mattered. He taught the children how to think logically, how to calculate fuel for machines, and how to follow orders. To him, there was no space for music, art, or gentle things. One day, a new teacher came from Earth. His name was Milan. He was not tall or loud like Vorn. Instead, he was quiet, with kind eyes and calm steps. He carried only a small bag, and in that bag was an old wooden violin. The children noticed it as soon as he walked into the school. Some whispered to each other, for they had never seen such an instrument before. Milan greeted the children with a smile. His voice was soft, and he spoke as if every word carried warmth. He told them stories of Earth, of blue skies and oceans, of green forests and great cities. The children listened with wide eyes, for many of them had never seen Earth. They had been born on Arden, where the sky was pale and the land was rough. During the first week, Milan helped with small classes. He taught reading and writing, and he helped the younger children with numbers. The children liked him, for he never raised his voice when they made mistakes. He guided them patiently. Some of the older students asked about the strange object. In his bag, "It is a violin," Milan said. He pulled it out and held it with gentle hands. The polished wood shone faintly under the light. On Earth, this was used to make music. The children leaned closer. They had heard recorded songs before, but never real music from an instrument. They begged him to play, but before he could answer, Vorn entered the room. Vorn's eyes narrowed at the sight of the violin. He crossed his arms and gave a sharp laugh. "What is this, Milan? Do you plan to waste time with toys? These children must learn useful things. Music will not help them fix machines or fight enemies." Milan did not argue. He simply placed the violin back into its case. The children looked disappointed, but he only smiled gently and said, "Another time." After Vorn left, some of the children whispered to Milan, "Please, teacher, will you play for us? Just once." Milan shook his head softly. "Not today. There is a time for everything. Be patient." Word of the violin spread quickly through the colony. Some laughed, saying it was foolish to bring such a fragile object across the stars. Others were curious, wondering what it would sound like. But Vorn was not amused. He felt his authority was being challenged. The children had started to admire Milan, and that made Vorn uneasy. One evening, during a staff meeting, Vorn made his opinion clear. "We are on a harsh world. We need teachers who prepare children for survival, not for foolish dreams. A violin will not feed anyone. It will not protect the colony. I say it is useless." Some of the staff nodded, not wishing to anger Vorn, but a few kept silent, for they too felt there was something missing in their lives. They remembered Earth's festivals, songs, and laughter. Life on Arden was strong, but it was also cold. Milan sat quietly through Vorn's speech. He did not defend himself, nor did he boast about his skill. He simply placed his hand on the violin case and smiled softly. The children, however, were not silent. They began to ask more questions in class. They wanted to know about music, about Earth's old traditions, about how a violin could speak without words. Their curiosity grew, and though Vorn scolded them, their excitement did not fade. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the steel towers, Milan stood by the window of the schoolhouse. He looked at the plains stretching into the horizon, endless and empty. He thought of Earth, of the places where music had once filled the air. He knew that one day soon, the colony would hear the voice of the violin, not for pride, not for challenge, but because the people of Arden needed more than just survival. They needed to remember what it meant to be human. The children did not know it yet, but their world was about to change. Days passed on the colony world of Arden, and whispers about Milan and his violin spread through the settlement. Some adults laughed at the idea of a teacher carrying an old earth instrument, but the children could not forget it. Their eyes often turned toward the case resting near Milan's desk. They wondered how such a small thing could create the music he had spoken about. Teacher Vorn grew more restless with every passing day. He noticed the students whispering about Milan, their eyes glowing with curiosity whenever the violin was mentioned. It made him feel as if his control was slipping. To Vorn, strength and order were everything. He could not allow a quiet newcomer with an outdated wooden box to distract his students. One morning, Vorn decided to end the matter once and for all. The school staff and several parents were gathered in the assembly hall. The governor of the colony was expected to visit in a few weeks, and preparations were already being made. Vorn used this chance to speak loudly in front of everyone. "People of Arden," he began, his voice sharp and commanding, "we work hard to build this colony. We cannot waste time on foolish things that belong to a soft earth life. This new teacher, Milan, carries a violin and fills the children's heads with dreams. But music does not plow fields. Music does not defend us from enemies. Music is useless here." Some nodded, agreeing with him. Life on Arden was indeed harsh, and they feared anything that did not add directly to survival. But others stayed silent. They remembered how tired and heavy life had become, how children rarely laughed. They thought of Milan's gentle way of teaching, and some wondered if perhaps he carried something important after all. Vorn noticed their silence, and his pride grew hot with anger. He turned toward Milan, who stood quietly at the side of the room, holding the violin case. Vorn's eyes shone with challenge. "Very well," Vorn said. "If this violin is not a useless toy, then let it prove itself when the governor visits. You will play before him and the entire colony if your music can impress him. I will admit you have a place here, but if not, then everyone will know you are wasting our time." The hall grew quiet. All eyes turned to Milan. The challenge was bold, and some even felt it was unfair. Yet Milan did not show anger. He simply bowed his head slightly and spoke in his calm voice. "If that is what you wish, Teacher Vorn, then I will play when the governor arrives," Milan said, not to prove pride, but to share something worth remembering. The children's faces lit up with excitement. They had never heard live music before, and the idea of hearing the violin during such an important day filled them with wonder. They began whispering to each other, imagining what the sound might be like. But Vorn only smirked. He felt certain that Milan would fail. In his mind, music could never stand against the hard demands of colony life. In the days that followed, the story of the challenge spread beyond the school. Farmers in the fields spoke of it. Engineers in the workshops discussed it during their breaks. Some laughed and said the new teacher would embarrass himself. Others quietly hoped for something different, something that might remind them of Earth's beauty. The children, however, could not wait. They gathered around Milan after classes, asking him to play for them before the big day. He only smiled and shook his head. "Patience," he told them. "Music is not only sound, it is also timing. The right moment will come." Still, he did not ignore their interest. He began teaching them small things. He showed them how a violin bow was drawn across the strings, how sound came from vibration, how each note joined another to form a melody. He let them hum simple patterns, and soon the schoolyard was filled with soft voices practicing gentle tunes. For the first time, laughter returned to the children's play. Vorn noticed it and grew even more bitter. He shouted at the children, telling them to stop wasting their time. Yet deep inside, even he felt unsettled by the change in the air. The children were happier, their faces brighter, their steps lighter. Something was happening, and he could not stop it. One evening, as the sun dipped low across the plains, Milan sat by the school window with the violin in his lap. He did not play, but his fingers moved gently across the strings, as if remembering old songs. A few children sat nearby, watching silently. "Teacher," one of them whispered, "why did you accept Vorn's challenge? What if they laugh at you?" Milan smiled softly. "Laughter does not harm truth," he said. "Music is not for pride, nor for victory. It is for the heart, and hearts are stronger than many believe." The child thought about his words and nodded slowly. Though still unsure, they felt a strange warmth in their chest. The days passed quickly. Soon the governor's visit would arrive, and with it, the challenge. The colony waited with curiosity, some with hope, others with doubt. But in the middle of it all stood Milan, calm and steady, carrying an old violin that many believed would never matter. Yet deep within the quiet teacher's heart, there was a song that could change everything. The colony of Arden was not a large place, and news traveled quickly. By the end of the week, nearly everyone had heard of the strange challenge. The quiet new teacher, Milan, was going to play his violin before the governor and all the people. Some laughed when they heard it, shaking their heads. Others whispered with curiosity. After all, most had never heard a real violin in their lives. At the market, farmers argued about it while trading goods. "What use is a violin here?" one said as he carried a basket of grain. "We need food, not songs." Another farmer answered, "Perhaps food keeps the body alive, but music may keep the spirit alive." Do you not miss the sounds of earth? In the workshops, engineers wiped oil from their hands and spoke of the coming day. "If the teacher plays well," one worker said, "maybe it will remind us that humans are more than machines." But others laughed. "It will be nothing," they said. "The governor will frown, the children will cry, and the new teacher will leave." The children, however, were the most excited. They whispered in corners, their eyes shining with wonder. Some tried to imagine what the violin would sound like. Others begged Milan every day after class to play even a small tune. "Not yet," Milan would say with a gentle smile. "A gift is sweetest when given at the right moment. Let us wait together." Though he would not play, he did not leave them empty-handed. He taught them to clap rhythms with their hands. He showed them how humming together made their voices blend. Soon, during breaks, the schoolyard echoed with patterns of claps and soft songs. The sound was not music as Earth once knew it, but it brought laughter to children who had long forgotten how to play with joy. Teacher Vorn grew more restless as this spread. He walked past the children, hearing them hum simple tunes Milan had taught. He scolded them harshly, but the sound returned again as soon as his back was turned. He could not understand why such small things filled them with so much happiness. To him, it felt like his control was slipping away. One evening, the governor's assistant arrived in the colony to check on preparations for the visit. People greeted her with respect, for the governor's word was law. When she heard of the challenge between the two teachers, she raised her eyebrows in surprise. "A violin performance during the governor's visit?" she asked. "That is unusual." Some tried to convince her it was a mistake, but the children's voices could not be silenced. They begged her to allow it. Even some parents joined in, quietly admitting they wished to hear it too. The assistant finally agreed to pass word to the governor, though she warned them he was a serious man with little patience for games. The news only spread further. By now, people who had once laughed grew curious. They wondered, what if the violin really could show something new? The alien envoys who sometimes visited Arden also heard the rumors. They belonged to a small allied species, gentle in nature, who often helped with trade. They had never heard of an earth violin, and their curiosity was strong. They had planned to attend the governor's gathering. In the middle of all this talk, Milan remained calm. He still taught his lessons each day, still guided the children. With patience, in the evenings, he would polish the violin, his hands gentle on the wood, as though the instrument was alive. Sometimes he closed his eyes and moved his fingers across the strings without sound. Practicing in silence, one child, curious, asked him, "Teacher, are you not afraid? What if the governor does not like your music?" Milan looked at the child kindly. "Music is not about being liked or disliked. Music is a truth, like the rising sun. Some may turn away from it, but it still shines. If even one heart is touched, then it is enough." The child thought about this and felt a quiet strength in those words. Meanwhile, the day of the governor's visit drew closer. The colony grew. Restless with preparation, streets were cleaned, banners were hung, and machines were polished. Soldiers trained in the yards, ready to show the colony's strength. Teacher Vorn prepared long speeches, proud of his strict teaching methods and determined to show the governor how well disciplined the children were under his care. But in the corners of the colony, whispers about the violin grew louder. The children hummed their small songs, filling the air with a strange new energy. Parents noticed their children's brighter faces and softer voices. Some began to think that perhaps Vorn was wrong, and perhaps Milan's gift was something the colony truly needed. One night, Milan stood outside beneath the pale, ardent sky. The stars shimmered faintly above him, so far away. He held the violin in his hands and whispered softly, though no one else could hear. May this music carry the memory of Earth. May it remind them of who they are. The time of waiting was almost over. Soon, the governor would arrive, and the colony would witness a moment they would never forget. The day finally came when the governor's ship landed on Arden. The whole colony gathered near the spaceport to welcome him. Soldiers in neat uniforms stood in rows. Farmers wore their cleanest clothes, and children whispered with excitement. The air was filled with tension, for the governor was known as a strict man who valued discipline above all else. The ship's engines roared as it touched down on the landing field. Dust rose into the air, and then the ramp lowered slowly. The governor stepped out, followed by his aides and guards. He was tall, with silver streaks in his hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. The people bowed respectfully, and silence filled the place. Teacher Vorn stood proudly at the front of the school group, waiting to show the results of his hard training. He had prepared the children to stand straight and silent. Like soldiers, their faces were stiff, and their backs were straight. Vorn believed the governor would be pleased with such discipline. Milan stood quietly among the teachers, holding the violin case at his side. The children's eyes often turned toward him, but he gave them only a calm smile. The governor was first led through the colony, shown the farms, the workshops, and the towers that had been built in the past years. He asked sharp questions and gave short comments, his face serious at all times. Finally, he was brought to the school assembly hall, where the children and teachers waited. The hall was decorated with banners, though the colors were plain. Parents filled the seats, and a few alien envoys from the allied race sat near the back. They had heard of the challenge and were very curious. Vorn stepped forward to greet the governor. "Welcome to our school, Governor," he said with pride. "Here we train the children of Arden to be strong, disciplined, and prepared for every duty. They will be the backbone of this colony." The governor nodded, his eyes scanning the hall. "Show me," he said simply. Vorn motioned, and the children stood in perfect rows. They saluted with sharp movements, recited numbers, and repeated lessons in unison. Their voices were strong, but their faces held no light. The governor listened, his expression unreadable. When the display ended, Vorn looked proud. He believed he had impressed the governor with order and control. But before Vorn could continue, a small voice came from the back of the hall. It was one of the children, whispering just loudly enough to be heard. "What about Teacher Milan's violin?" The hall grew still. All eyes turned toward the child, and then toward Milan. The governor raised an eyebrow. "A violin?" he asked. Vorn's face darkened. He tried to wave the matter away. "It is nothing, Governor. A toy from Earth, carried here by our new teacher. It is no use." But the children would not remain silent. One after another, they whispered, "Please, let him play. Please, Governor." Their voices filled the hall, gentle but insistent. Parents shifted in their seats, and even the alien envoys leaned forward with interest. The governor turned his sharp gaze toward Milan. "Is this true?" he asked. "Do you carry a violin?" Milan stepped forward and bowed his head respectfully. "Yes, Governor, I carry it. It is an old instrument from Earth, meant to bring music. And you can play it?" the governor asked. "Yes," Milan answered simply. The governor studied him for a moment. Then he spoke in his steady, commanding voice. "Then play. Let US hear what this violin can give to a colony that struggles each day to survive. Vorn opened his mouth to protest, but he stopped when he saw the governor's stern eyes. He stepped back, his pride burning inside him. Milan placed the violin case on a small table and opened it. The polished wood of the instrument caught the light, shining warmly in the plain hall. The children leaned forward, their eyes wide, even. The adults grew silent, waiting. Milan lifted the violin with gentle hands. He placed it under his chin and raised the bow. For a moment, he closed his eyes. The hall was still, every sound hushed. Then, with a soft movement, the bow touched the strings. A single note filled the air. It was pure and clear, unlike anything the colony had ever heard. The sound hung in the hall like a ray of light, delicate yet strong. The children gasped softly, and the alien envoys tilted their heads, their eyes shining with wonder. The note grew into a melody, slow and gentle, rising and falling like waves of the sea. It carried the memory of Earth's skies, its forests, its rivers. It spoke without words, telling of beauty, sorrow, and hope. The hall, which had moments before been filled with stiff silence, now breathed with life. The governor sat still, his sharp eyes softening slightly. The aides behind him exchanged glances, surprised by the sound. Parents felt their hearts stir, and some blinked back tears. Even Vorn, who had mocked the violin, felt something he could not explain. The music slipped past his pride and touch something deep inside him. Milan played on, his bow moving gently, his fingers dancing on the strings. The violin sang, not for pride, not for victory, but for the soul of every person in the hall. The first part of the performance had begun, and already the people of Arden felt something awakening in their hearts, something they had long forgotten. The first note from Milan's violin was enough to quiet every corner of the hall. It was a sound that no one in Arden had ever truly heard before, a sound that felt alive. The melody moved gently, like a soft wind passing over fields of grass. It rose and fell, carrying both sorrow and hope in its voice. The children leaned forward, their eyes wide and shining. They had begged for this moment, and now they felt as though their dreams had taken shape in the air. Parents sat still, their hearts heavy yet light at the same time, as if memories long buried were returning to them. Even the governor, a man known for his stern and cold manner, sat without moving, his sharp eyes softened by the music. The alien envoys were perhaps the most moved of all. Their species had never created music in this way. They exchanged glances, their eyes filled with wonder. Some closed their lids, letting the vibrations wash over them. For them, this was not only sound but something greater, something that touched the soul. Milan did not rush. His bow glided across the strings with patience, each note carrying the weight of Earth's long story. The melody spoke of oceans under blue skies, of forests whispering in the wind, of cities alive with laughter and voices. It also carried sadness, the pain of leaving Earth behind, the struggle of distant colonies like Arden. Yet always, beneath the sorrow, there was hope. The people listened as though the music had captured their breath. Some children smiled with tears in their eyes. A mother pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart beat faster. A farmer whispered softly, "I had forgotten what beauty sounded like." Even Vorn, who had mocked Milan from the beginning, could not escape the pull of the music. At first, he tried to fold his arms and keep his face stern, but slowly his eyes grew wet. He looked away, ashamed of the feeling stirring inside him. The hall was silent except for the violin. No one spoke, no one coughed, no one moved. It was as if the entire colony had stopped to listen. The music wove around them like a thread, connecting each heart to the next. For a few moments, all of Arden breathed together, bound by the sound of one old instrument carried across the stars. The melody began to rise. Milan's bow moved faster, the notes lifting higher, carrying strength and triumph, the sorrow of leaving Earth transformed into determination, the courage of humanity to reach beyond their home, to build new worlds. The sound filled the hall, echoing against the walls, reaching every corner. The children sat straighter, their eyes bright, As if they were being reminded of something great within themselves, the governor's face, usually so hard, now showed a small glimmer of emotion. A single tear escaped the corner of his eye, though. He quickly brushed it away. His aides noticed but said nothing. They too were moved. The alien envoys could no longer hide their feelings. One of them, with trembling hands, touched the edge of the bench as if to hold on to the sound. Another whispered in their own language, a word that meant sacred. At last, the music slowed again. Milan's bow drew out the final notes, soft and gentle, like the fading glow of a sunset. The last sound lingered in the air, clear and pure. Before dissolving into silence, no one moved. The hall remained frozen. Every person caught between silence and the memory of what they had just heard. Then, slowly, a sound rose. It was the sound of small hands clapping. A child had begun to applaud. Another joined, and then another, until the entire hall was filled with thunderous applause. The children cheered, their voices filled with joy. Parents stood to their feet, clapping harder. Some wept openly, not caring who saw. The alien envoys rose as well, bowing deeply toward Milan, their eyes shining. The governor himself stood. His face was firm, but his voice carried weight. This, he said, is the power of Earth. This is what we must never forget. Not only steel, not only fire, but also heart. This is why humanity endures. Milan bowed his head, not with pride, but with quiet humility. He placed the violin gently back in its case, as if it were a treasure, and stood silently as the people celebrated round him. Vorn sat in silence, unable to lift his head. His pride had been broken, but more than that, he felt something he had long buried, a longing, a recognition of the beauty he had denied. He clenched his fists, not in anger, but in shame. The governor turned to the alien envoys. "What did you think of the music?" One of them answered with a trembling voice. "We have traded with humans for many years. We have seen your machines, your ships, your weapons. But today, for the first time, we understand your soul. This music must be shared beyond this colony. It must be carried across the stars." The governor nodded slowly. "So it shall be." That night, the colony of Arden was alive with talk. The people spoke not of Vorn's lessons or speeches, but of Milan's violin. The sound of Earth had returned to them, and it had reminded them of who they were. For the first time in many years, the colony felt more than survival. They felt human. The applause in the hall still echoed long after the last note of Milan's violin had faded. The governor's words carried weight across the colony, and people felt they had witnessed something far greater than a simple performance. The children talked excitedly, the parents shared quiet tears, and even the alien envoys whispered among themselves with deep respect. But in the corner, Teacher Vorn sat with his head bowed. He had always believed strength came only through discipline, numbers, and rigid control. Yet he could not deny what he had just felt. The violin's voice had touched him in a way his strict lessons never had. He had laughed at Milan, called him weak, and dismissed music as useless. Now his heart burned with shame. The governor noticed Vorn and spoke firmly, so the whole hall could hear. "Teacher Vorn, you have trained these children in order and discipline, but you forgot one truth. A human is not only mind and body. A human is also heart. Without heart, we are no different from machines." Vorn lifted his head, his face pale. He wanted to argue, but the words would not come. The governor's gaze was heavy, and the silence of the hall pressed against him. Slowly, he stood and bowed. "I was wrong," he admitted in a voice that shook. "I mocked what I did not understand. I see now that music is not weakness. It is strength of another kind." The hall remained silent, but the children's eyes softened. They did not hate him, though they had feared him for many years. They only looked at him with curiosity, as if waiting to see what he would become now. The governor then turned to Milan. "Teacher Milan, today you gave this colony more than words. You gave them memory, hope, and unity. This is the lesson they will carry forward." Milan bowed his head humbly. "Governor, I did not play to win. I played because beauty is needed even in hard places. A colony without joy will not survive in the long years ahead. The alien envoys stepped forward then. Their leader, a tall being with soft silver eyes, spoke in a voice filled with awe. Your music has touched us. We have no such thing in our worlds. We ask that you allow us to carry these melodies to our people, so they too may know the voice of earth. Milan agreed with a gentle nod. Music belongs to all. If it can bring peace to your people, then let it travel with you. The governor placed his hand on the violin case. This colony will remember today. Let it be known that we value not only strength, but also spirit. Teacher Milan, your place here is secure. The crowd cheered, and the children rushed to Milan, surrounding him with joy. Some asked if they could learn to play like him. Others begged to hear more songs. Milan promised that one day they too would hold instruments and create music of their own. As the people left the hall, Vorn approached Milan slowly. His pride was wounded, but his voice was sincere. I judged you wrongly. I thought you weak because you were gentle. But today I saw more strength in you than I ever showed. Forgive me. Milan placed a hand on Vorn's shoulder. There is nothing to forgive. Every lesson is part of the journey. Perhaps now we can teach together. You bring discipline, and I bring music. Both are needed. Vorn's eyes widened. He had expected scorn, not kindness. He bowed his head, deeply, more humble than ever before. That evening, the colony was alive with energy. People gathered outside their homes, speaking of the performance. Children hummed the melodies they had heard, trying to keep the sound alive in their hearts. Some adults began carving small wooden shapes, dreaming of instruments for their children. The alien envoys visited Milan once more before leaving. They carried with them recordings of his music, their hands trembling with reverence. Your song will travel beyond the stars, they said. It will tell other worlds that humans are not only fighters, but dreamers. The governor, before departing, spoke again to the colony. Let today be remembered as the day Arden found its heart. We must build machines, we must train soldiers, but we must also keep music and beauty alive. Without them, our struggle is empty. When the governor's ship rose into the sky that night, the people of Arden stood together on the plains, watching the engines vanish into the stars. For once, they did not feel small or forgotten. They felt proud because they carried something greater than weapons or walls. They carried a song. Inside the quiet schoolhouse, Milan sat by the window with the violin on his lap. He looked out at the plains, listening to the echoes of children humming outside. His heart was full. He had not come to Arden to win a challenge. He had come to remind them that humanity was more than survival. And now, he knew the lesson had taken root. The violin rested in his hands like a friend, its strings still warm from the day. Milan whispered softly, "This is only the beginning." And indeed, it was. The people of Arden had learned a lesson. They would never forget that true strength comes not only from discipline and order, but from the music of the heart. The next morning on the colony of Arden, the sky was bright and calm. People carried on with their work, but their hearts were lighter than before. The memory of Milan's violin was still fresh in their minds. Children hummed the tune as they walked to school, and adults spoke with pride about the moment that had united them all. Something inside the colony had changed. Teacher Milan entered the schoolhouse early. As he always did, he expected the room to be quiet, but instead he found many children already waiting for him. They were sitting in rows, their eyes wide with eagerness. Some held sticks of wood. Others carried old cans or bottles. They had made simple tools that they hoped could sound like instruments. One boy stood up and asked, "Teacher, can you teach us how to make music like you did yesterday?" Milan smiled warmly. He set his violin on the table and looked at the children. Music is not only about instruments. Music begins with listening, with feeling. Even your voice can carry a song. The children leaned closer. Milan tapped gently on the table and began to hum a soft melody. Soon the children joined in. Some clapped, some tapped on their wooden sticks, and others tried to hum along. The room filled with a rhythm that was imperfect but full of joy. For the first time, the children of Arden created music of their own. Word spread quickly, and soon adults gathered at the door to listen. Some smiled, some even wiped tears from their eyes. The schoolhouse became a place of harmony, and people realized that music had become part of their lives. Teacher Vorn also stood at the back. He watched quietly, his arms folded, but his expression softer than before. After the lesson ended, he stepped forward and spoke. "Milan, I wish to help. I may not understand the strings of a violin, but I know how to guide discipline. Perhaps I can train the children to practice together in rhythm." Milan nodded with respect. "Yes, discipline and music must walk side by side. Together we can build something lasting." From that day, the school had two teachers. Milan showed the children how to sing, hum, and make simple instruments from wood and string. Vorn taught them patience, timing, and order, so their sounds would rise together in harmony. What had once been a place of strict silence now echoed with laughter and melody. As weeks passed, the colony became alive with new energy. Workers hummed while they repaired machines. Mothers sang lullabies while they cooked. Fathers carved wooden flutes and drums for their children. Even the alien envoys, who had returned once more, brought strange tools from their world, eager to see how humans would turn them into music. The governor sent messages from the capital, praising the colony. He declared Arden not only a place of survival, but also a place of culture. "You are showing the galaxy," he wrote, "that humanity's heart is as strong as its hands." One evening, the colony prepared for a gathering in the central square. This time it was not a governor's visit or a challenge. It was their own choice. The people of Arden wanted to hear their children play. Wooden flutes, drums, and voices filled the air as the children performed. The sound was simple, but it carried strength. The crowd clapped along, their hearts united. Milan stood at the side with quiet pride. He did not lead them, for this music was theirs. He only listened, knowing that the seed he planted had grown into something larger than himself. Teacher Vorn came to stand beside him. "I once thought I was teaching them strength," Vorn said, "but I see now that real strength is when they carry each other with joy. You gave them that." Milan shook his head gently. "We gave it together. You showed them how to stand firm. I showed them how to sing. Both are needed." The night sky above Arden was filled with stars, and the sound of music rose up to meet them. The alien envoys recorded every note, promising to share it with distant worlds. For the first time, the people of Arden felt that their small colony had a voice that reached far beyond their own. Planet. As the music ended, the crowd cheered. The governor's words were remembered, and Milan's violin had become a symbol. But more than that, the people now carried music in their hearts. It was no longer just about one man or one performance. It belonged to everyone. Later that night, Milan sat outside his small home. He held the violin and looked at the stars. He thought about the road ahead. The colony still had many challenges. They would need food, water, and strong defenses. But now he knew they would face them not with silence, but with song. He whispered to himself, "Music will carry us through the hardest days. It will remind us who we are." In the distance, children were still humming as they walked home, their voices rising softly into the night. Milan closed his eyes, listening. The colony of Arden had found not only survival, but also meaning. And in that simple harmony, the future felt brighter. The story of the teacher mocked for his violin had ended with something far greater. The colony would never forget, and neither would the stars that now carried their song across the galaxy.